Hello, everybody. I also want to give a shout out for the best comment I've seen so far is Freddie will be playing Sleazy E tonight, which if I just had to look it up. If anybody just go ahead and just Google it and look up some Easy E. Oh man, he looks just like him right now. I know. It's like it's perfect.
Yes. By the way, I had us playing on another one. I was like, "Oh, what's going on here? I think my stuff's all messed up. I got to fix now." So yeah, that I guess that's the dude that so the Easy E story. You know that story.
I don't know what story other than you look like Easy E.
So it's true. So what Alan's referencing is the people from the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. KDA did that whole interview series, and they asked me what was the first album I ever bought, and it was an Easy E tape, and the principal took it and smashed it with his paddle, and then spanked me for bringing such explicit lyrics to the school.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Dang. And what'd you say? Fuck the police.
So that was Ice Cube that said that, right? But no, but
it was the NWA.
He was in the same
part of it.
He was in the same crew, but I used to love that.
Yeah, cruising down the street in my 6'4". How about that?
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Ryan, do you know that lyric at least?
I do. I did see the movie with Easy.
Good. You caught the 2011 version or whatever it was when it came out.
I wasn't allowed to listen to that stuff growing up.
I forget. We were just talking backstage about some other stuff that you had never listened to, never knew about. So
very sheltered as a child.
Yeah, we're gonna add that to the list of all the things that you should have watched growing up, and we're gonna have to make sure that you're on point now.
Give Ryan a marathon of movies, music.
80s.
I don't know. Like, I feel like I had a Masterpiece CD next to DC Talk in my CD case as a kid. So it's all about balance.
Make them say,
yeah,
man, how did that ever make it? Like, looking back, isn't that
how did it not ever make it? I mean, one of the top 10 greatest hits of all time. How
Blake, did you wear camo and have the tank chain?
Yeah.
I don't know, Ryan. Did you?
I did not.
Definitely got one of those CDs taken by school officials for bringing it on a field trip. So, my $15 spent at the CD store was gone very quickly whenever they listened to the first song.
You playing Ice Cream Man for?
Blake, I'm actually kind of curious. What was your first CD? Do you remember?
Ooh, so this is gonna have like no bearing on any of that, but I'm pretty sure it's Colin Ray, country singer.
Oh
yeah, real throwback. He was up there. The country music we could get away with, and Jacksonville's basically the South, so he was up there, and maybe a Trisha Yearwood CD, I think, as well.
Oh,
Leanne Rhymes. 90s country was alive and well.
Yeah. Yeah, if you listen to some of the lyrics though, like people who are listening to country, they're going to church and they're talking about Jesus all the time. I'm like, have you seen the lyrics of the music that you guys are listening to?
Yeah. That is some of them. I had that discussion with a buddy of mine. What was it? It was like a Garth Brooks song. I'm like, it's kind of like a creepy song. He's like, no, it's not. What are you talking about? And it's like, this old man's or old woman seducing the ranch hand, and even in or out of context, it's still kind of weird lyrics.
Yeah. Well, have you seen the some of the theories on Garth Brooks?
Yeah, about and Tom Segura big on that, of like every tour date has a cold case murder or something.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. Oh, that's insane. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's kind of
never listened to Garth Brooks because he's not on streaming anymore. So it's like,
yeah, he's so anti-streaming. I think you can buy his you can actually download his stuff on like Amazon Music, but you have to pay for it.
That's the biggest way to become irrelevant is just by getting rid of anything
I know,
future
we already
looking,
pay
right?
for the streaming.
Yeah. It's like just bury your head in the sand while we're at it. I do have to give a shout out here because I also share a fellow relationship with our friend Brian over here. My first CD also was Jack Diesel. That was my first CD ever, which is ironic now that I still listen to his music today because he's actually really big into dubstep. I didn't know that.
Is he still DJing and doing dubstep stuff?
Oh yeah.
Slinging Papa John's pizzas.
Oh yeah.
He does everything.
Yeah, he does it all.
It's so fun though. It's so
Man is a
fun.
Renaissance man.
You know, I've actually seen Shaq twice in 2 of his shows. So it's fun.
I did not have that on my BCR Roundtable bingo card. Of
There's a lot of things you'll learn about Kenny one of these days.
over under on how many times you've seen Shaq. I was putting the line at like 0.5.
Oh yeah. All right, y'all ready to get into this?
Let's do it.
This tonight. Actually, you know what?
I'd rather
can't
talk
yet.
Before we
CDs
mention it, do we want to talk
music.
about how good my audio is?
Oh yeah. Yes, Blake. Thank you. If any doesn't notice, Blake finally caved after running a successful company for almost a decade. He decided to finally buy a new laptop. So, welcome to the next century, and hopefully, you can now buy a new laptop every couple of years.
Yeah, I will be writing handwritten apology letters to every listener. So be looking for those in the mail. They will come
You
with a
upgraded
$10
from
gift card
Gateway-
to Sealbox.
Gateway
and,
2000 to an Acer.
That's awesome.
I really didn't want that to be the only fix, but me and Brian got on to record our weekly video, and he's like, "Hold on, where are you doing this from? This is pretty good." I'm like, just in my office. I did get a new laptop. He's like, "Oh, okay." I'm like, "Son of a gun, is that all it was? I could have
The whole time.
sworn this whole time y'all were messing with me." But oh well, what do you do? It's we're here now.
We had to. Before we move on, though, real quick, because Eric, we didn't ask you what was your first CD?
I was thinking about it. I was going to say Green Day Dookie, but I actually,
Ooh,
I think I had it on cassette. So as far as I can remember, was Smashing Pumpkins' Infinite Sadness. You know, that double CD that they
great
came out
CD.
with. Yeah, I
First
think
one you got
that
a
might
double?
have been it.
Oof,
Yeah,
nice.
1979.
stuff.
It's on there.
yeah.
Oh, I thought 1792 was their big song, but maybe it was 1979.
Either or.
Smashing Bourbons,
There you go. I was about to say, Smashing
1974
Bartons all
version.
day.
Yeah, that's a good sticker for somebody. Somebody's got to use that. Anybody got a pick going on? You got to tell. That's funny.
Somebody is. All right, here we go. Everybody, welcome back. It is another fresh, brand new episode of Bourbon Pursued. I'm Kenny Coleman.
Ryan Cecil here.
Fred Minnick.
Fred looking like Easy E in the house, but we are going to have a fun one as we start talking about the changing landscape of bourbon only because of how much people have overproduced in the past couple of years. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and introduce the rest of the guys on the round table tonight. Eric, you're up first.
Okay, I'm Eric from Breaking Bourbon. Always happy to be here. And if you don't know who Breaking Bourbon are, we're 3 guys. We do a lot of reviews. So if you've ever looked for a review, you maybe have come across us.
It's actually kind of funny. Is it hard to say that? Like when you figure out the is versus are when you're trying to describe
it is,
breaking
a little
bourbon?
bit, yeah.
Because it's a collective we, which is an are, but you're also like a singular noun, which is an is.
Breaking bourbon.
Bourbonites.
And Blake, go ahead and introduce yourself since
Yes,
now
I
you have
am.
the crystal clear audio of all time.
You know, it only took to episode whatever this is 110. But I'm Blake from Sealbox. Always fun to be here. So looking forward to jumping in on this topic.
Yes. And Blake,
didn't
you're
know
gonna
you
be
sounded
one
that bad.
person. Sorry, what'd you say, Ryan?
I didn't know he sounded that bad till now. Had a clear audio.
Even with a clear mic, you still.
Now we'll just get that camera fixed. No, I'm
That's
just
right.
kidding.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
look
That's well. I was trying to get Brian to help me with my lighting today. I'm like, does this look warmer? He's like, no, you still look like a ghost. I'm like, okay, well, baby steps. We'll figure this out.
fluorescent lights. It can only get you so far.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this one's going to be really kind of good to talk about in, Ryan and I will be able to have some good insight into it. Blake as well, because Blake is also owner of some brands and some barrels. But I'll also love to kind of get the other side of this when we talk about with Fred and Eric, as we start getting into maybe like what are consumers chasing after? Like, what do you think the general public's going to be thinking about? And we're going to be talking about sourcing. And we've talked over the years, and anybody that's been paying attention to the show in, I don't know, maybe the past, we'll say 7 to 10 years, has kind of like heard the story of Ryan and I when we started talking about, even when starting the podcast, and even I think most people that are getting into bourbon don't really have an idea of what happens behind the closed doors, all the secret handshakes, the PDFs with barrels and spreadsheets and prices. But there's this whole world of sourcing that exists. And at the very beginning, when you're getting into this, you have a very naivety, I guess you could say, of thinking, well, I don't want to buy anything from a sourced product. I only want to buy something that is, made by the distillery. And then as you keep going, you realize, well, if I look on the shelf, about maybe 70% of the products on here are all considered sourced. And here's the one I'll even throw at you. Did you know that your own favorite Blanton's and Pappy Van Winkle are, I guess, technically sourced products? Because, they don't actually own the stocks. They actually source it from a different distillery. Blanton's is a really good example of that. But as we start digging into this, I kind of want to talk about, do we feel first has the connotation of sourced kind of dissipated a little bit? And then on the second half of the show, I kind of talk about, do we think that we might see a renaissance? Could we see an excitement happening because of the way the market has shifted and there's so many barrels going to be available? And how are we going to make sure that as a consumer, what are you going to be chasing after? So let's kind of start with that first one. Do you all think that the negative connotation of a sourced whiskey has finally left the building? Has grandma died? Has we put it to bed? Is this something that we can say it's squashed, finito, done? Let's go ahead and everybody's happy with sourced whiskey all of a sudden. Somebody open it up.
I would say, well, I'd say we're getting closer, whatever the analogy was about grandma, wherever she's leaving. I don't think we're to that point yet. I still think there's a lot of people who think if you don't distill it, it's not your product. American whiskey, for whatever reason, we talked about this, it's always put the focus on the master distiller. Scotch, Irish whiskey, other international whiskeys, they're perfectly fine with this. Independent bottling has been a long time tradition, especially in the Scotch world. And we're getting closer for sure. I think just, the last 10 years, a lot of education has happened. I don't think it's nearly the dirty word that it was even 5 years ago, but I still think there's a lot of room for that category to grow and be elevated some. I think you got people doing it the right way, claiming that you made it whenever you just sourced it and bottled it. I think we're getting a lot of kind of the bad actors out on that side, and that helps a lot. But there's a lot of people who still have a problem with that. I mean, anytime we post something on Facebook, we'll still get the comment like, "Oh, they didn't make this." It's like, well, yeah, that bottle of Blanton's in your profile picture wasn't made by Ancient Age either. It's a partnership with Sazerac. So I think we're getting closer, but I still think there's just a lot of room left to grow with the source market before it becomes something that's really celebrated and sought after and everything else. I think we get this small percentage of consumers who gets it, they chase after it, they're happy about it. But I'd still say 99% of the bourbon drinking public is like, doesn't even know the difference, or if they did know the difference, would have a problem with it.
Yeah, I would agree with Blake. I think whiskey geeks, I think it's definitely accepted and it's actually sought after. With general consumers, as Blake mentioned, most of them are not aware or unaware. Like, you could have a bottle and then you tell them that you sourced, and like, what does that mean? You don't make it? And I think that's where most of the market still exists. And then you say that, even, as we've opened up Whiskey Row and had people come in that are new to the brand, this and that, and they're still like, well, is there plans to distill? And we're like, no,
Where's your
there's
stills?
yeah, and we're like, there's no plans to distill. Well, why wouldn't you want to make it? And we're like, well, because there's people that can make it way better than Kenny and I, but they're still like, I think if you're just getting into it, don't really understand the landscape, you're still like think that it should be made, by the producer. But as far as whiskey geeks, I still think people that distill their own kind of have an inherent advantage of that. Like as a consumer, you know, uh, Brian brought up an example in the chat. Would you rather have Still Austin Short Barrel? Two great brands. Still Austin's great in Texas, makes their own. Short Barrel, is a great sourcer of, different mash bills from MGP, Kentucky, all this, and they do finishing and they're on fire. But, the Still Austin probably has an edge because they make it themselves. Like if you put the two and two together, I would think a consumer would be like, okay, you make your own. I probably would lean more towards somebody that makes it over a source brand. And I think you see that with, even though there's like the buff turkey craze and the, high age statements of, like rare character and this and that. But, if you have like if you're looking at like a Russell's 13 or a very, very old Fitz or something, and next to a rare character, I think the big legacy brands that distill their own are going to win out with most consumers. Now, not whiskey geeks. I don't think that's the case, but I think distilling your own still has like a slight competitive marketing advantage out in the marketplace.
I think what's interesting about this is the people say, "Oh, you don't make your own whiskey," but yet those same people, they're not buying craft distiller products, right? So they're still buying sourced. And there used to be there was a time, when Chuck Cowdery was kind of in his heyday, he used to like out everybody on his blog about who was making what, and there would be some brands people were surprised by. And there was a brand called Mic Drop, which everybody here knows. When that brand came out and was like an overnight sensation to the Bourbon Geek world on the Facebook forums, that is when I saw everything change. Like people are like, I don't give a shit. They'll talk about it. The Wades of the world and us would still talk about it. But guess what? We're still drinking it. We're still buying it. And I think more than anything, it was an example of how great whiskey from Indiana could be, because that's what was the big driver, was the MGP distillery. And now that the market has changed, boy, is it a fun time to be an American whiskey fan, because you can buy a lot of stuff right now. You can buy a lot.
Yeah,
Eric, what are your thoughts?
I'll add to that too. Is I think sourcing sort of got a bad rap because there wasn't enough distilleries were kind of doing it on a wide scale. So as we all definitely know, so much of it was either MGP or Dickel, and that was what a lot of people, when they're getting into bourbon and learning more about bourbon, they kept hitting on the MGP and the Dickels, and they were like, oh, I'm kind of getting tired of this, because it just seemed like that was it. And that. And there's nothing wrong with either of those distilleries. They're great distilleries. So much of it was just too much of the same thing. So as we kind of get in this tonight and stock gets more plentiful, that is going to change. But the biggest brands, or some of the biggest brands of the last, let's say, 5 years, have been Smoke Wagon, Rare Character, Penelope, and we're talking about Buff Turkey too. Like nobody, those are all source brands that have been extremely popular, and really nobody gives a crap that they're sourced. People are buying up a lot, and they, and the price of those has not gone down either. They remain popular, and they, in some cases remain pricey.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that I remember getting into this and thinking, why would I pay the extra markup in something that was a source product, knowing that I had to trade I don't know how many hands, but by the time it actually reached the bottle, versus something that came directly from the distillery itself. And by doing that, you're paying a premium for something that somebody didn't actually make. It was years later until you finally just drop the blinders and you're just like, yeah, whatever. If it's good, it's good. There was a time where I definitely kind of had that thought and that premonition behind it. And Ryan, I think you brought up a really good point too about the competitive advantage, because I still think that still even holds in regard to a lot of people that still are getting into the category. They just don't know enough. And I mean, everybody that's listened to this show for quite a long time, or people that are here in the chat right now, I mean, a lot of people know that I would think that there's more whiskey on the shelf that is sourced than is not sourced today. Right. And so that is kind of ironic a little bit to say the least, because most people, it's like, even a lot of big, got Bullet. Can we start there? Up until a couple years ago, basically the biggest name around in whiskey. I mean, has, been one of the largest, most commercially successful sourced bourbon brands and whiskey brands on the market.
Yeah, but they still source their rye too.
Yes. We'll just say whiskey in general. They did a lot. But that's just part of an educational journey that most people kind of have to go on before they start learning about it. But it is kind of that sort of dichotomy in there. As I start thinking about sort of what's next in this world, and like, have we gotten over that stigma? I still think there's going to be time. I don't know. I think this might be the same old, is Jack Daniel's a bourbon argument for the next probably 5 to 10 years. Is sourced whiskey a bad thing? And as we start getting a little bit more into it, you're going to start learning no. There's a lot of, I started a few things in the chat, and I think there's a few different things to talk about. One, we talked about rare character already. Joe put it on here as something that's a really good case study. Rare character is obviously built all on sourced whiskey, but has a extremely loyal fan base. And not just loyal, I mean, they are willing to shell out tons and tons and tons of money for these sourced whiskeys that anybody has access to, but they're in a cool label. They have a wax top or whatever it is, right? Now, they could be said, they've got some really great, I'm sure they have a lot of great barrels, but just kind of goes to show you that there is something to be said just about what Pablo and his team have been able to build over there, because rare character, I think, is one of those anomalies over there that has certainly made a huge impression in the sourced whiskey market. The second is, we're talking about, Todd put it up as well as Blake put it up here, buff turkey. That's more of a recent phenomenon. I would think of that as something that is a very one-off kind of thing. Rare character started by purchasing high-aged MGP. Now they're getting some Dickel rye and a few other different things that are out there, but people are eating it up. The buff turkey kind of thing was, 15-year Buffalo Trace wild turkey. Who cares who has it? It just has a really good story. And for the most part, it's actually pretty damn good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the one thing I'd add there is just, there's different levels of sourcing. Somebody put 13th century in the comments, and that's one where MGP's making a mash bill for them, contract distilling, shipping that to Colorado to age. 13th Colony does some of the same stuff in Georgia. Even rare character, they're blending, they're getting lots and access to lots that aren't available a lot of places. Certainly, it's easy to say with sourcing, it's like, oh, well, they got the barrels that everybody else has. But there's different levels to it. If you're sourcing and doing all your own aging or doing different finishes, that's definitely different than just buying barrels and putting them in a bottle 3 months later and trying to get it out there. So, I think that's where there's still a lot of room to grow. It's grow the brand story, grow the connection with the audience, and have something that that there's a difference to it, and I'll kind of turn the questions around back to Kenny and Ryan. I mean, y'all are doing it a completely different way, where I wouldn't put you in the same category as a lot of brands that just say, oh, they source I mean, you're sourcing, but you're sourcing from contract distillation from three different distilleries. What has been the feedback when you try to explain that to customers of, well, we don't make it, but we also sit on it for a minimum of 4 years and a lot of our times, and we've worked with these distilleries to hit these mash bills and age and do all that stuff, and explaining that to customers? Is that something that they resonate with, or is it like, oh, they're just another source brand?
You know, well, I'll chime in. At first, it's too much information. We tried to give that spiel, to consumers, and it was just too overwhelming. And
Hey, give us your elevator pitch. Is this a 30-minute elevator ride? Because
I was going to say,
and
the
it was
Empire State
overwhelming.
Building doesn't have enough floors for us to finish.
But too, I think, but as a customer tries our products, they enjoy them, they buy them. That story has resonated with folks as they became more loyal to the brand, is that they want to understand where the whiskey's from, why we did it, why was there intentional. And I think too, with source brands like, specifically like, Nashville Barrel Company, Rare Character, River Roots, and like Short Barrel, and I think why they're so successful is they're strategic about what they're sourcing. As you mentioned, like a lot of these, these barrels are available to pretty much, the open market. I mean, you have some better relationships with brokers. You might get first access, this and that, but they have been very strategic about what certain whiskeys, whether they come in Kelvin or, or this certain lots, or they take that and they finish them in Kelvin or other unique finishes. But I think that's where the NDPs that are successful right now are the ones that are strategic about the contract distillation or the sourcing. They have intentionality behind it, that they're trying to create a product that's interesting, unique, and not just buying whiskey from the bulk market and putting it into a bottle.
And the other side, to kind of dovetail into what Ryan said, is that, yeah, the story is very convoluted when we talk about it. But when we had started our process, we didn't really have a whole lot of options. The source market whiskey was pretty much a desert, and anything that you wanted had 3 letters in it. And we said, well, we want to be different. We got to find something else that's out there. And, we have a lot of internal discussions already, and which will kind of lead into the second part of what I'm going to start talking about here is now that the tables have turned. When I was at Kentucky Bourbon Festival just last week, Dave Mandel from Whiskey House, obviously he started Bardstown Bourbon Company, started Whiskey House. They are a huge contract outfit, and all they do is try to contract and make whiskey for the people. He was on stage, and the question was asked him. They said, if you were to start a bourbon brand today, should you contract distill or should you just buy on the open market? And he said, without a doubt in my mind, you should not contract distill. And I was like, wait, the man who's trying to sell Still Time over here just said, I'm not trying to sell you on this. And it kind of just got me thinking. I was like, holy crap, like this is where we're definitely at a turning point where you are seeing way more ample supply that's on the market. And it's going to make us have to try to figure out strategically, well, what makes the most sense for our brand going forward? Because from a purely business perspective, it's like we have a ton of capital all tied up into inventory that we can't use, that we have to wait, and we're paying a huge chunk of change every single month to make sure that we're paying for insurance and storage fees and all that, and interest payments and everything like that on. So we have a lot of things to discuss internally about that. But good thing is, like, we have time to figure it out. But I think this is the one thing that will kind of help set the tone for this next half of the show as we start talking about, do we think that because there's going to be so much whiskey on the market that even sourced whiskey will be now even more exciting than potentially some of the stuff that is being, say, distilled at a distillery from a Still Austin or a Russell's or a Heaven Hill or something like that, because there's so much variety and availability that's out there.
Yeah, I think it's I think you're going to see a lot of concepts like yours and barrels, and I think you'll see a lot of like beautiful blends come out of this, and then you'll see people who release 12-year-old weeded bourbon at cask strength that we would have never seen. You know, I just think there's going to be. I used to be very much against the mindset of like, I can't wait for the bourbon bubble to pop, so there'll be more stuff on the shelf for me. I used to be very much against that mindset, but I'm kind of like, you know what? Those people had a point because it's happening. I saw something the other day. Maker's Mark has an age-stated cask strength product out there, you know, and they never did that. They were, you know, they used to preach like we bottled a taste, not for age. And I want to take this screenshot of this bottle I saw, and like, oh, I thought age didn't matter, you know. Now it matters. Now when it's a selling point, you need to sell it. It matters, and I think if you are like the market is whatever, and everything's happening, but for the next 5 years, at least the next 2 years, it's exciting to me. Like I get so many packages. I open them. I'm like really excited to see what they are. I'm disappointed in about 3/4 of them, but I'm still very excited to see like all this new stuff that's getting played around with. And that, what I do think is happening is that people are trying too hard to get away from the traditional flavor profiles. And so while all of these stocks are out there, if you're one of those people, don't get too cute. You know, the Kentucky bourbon profile has worked for years for a reason. You can get away from it a little bit, but don't veer off the cliff. And that's the only part where I get a little concerned when we talk about the source stuff.
When you talk about flavor profile, are you talking about just like the bourbon itself, or are you talking about the finishing train and what all
It's
the
it's all
crazy stuff there?
yeah, it's all the above. You know, it's like trying to do take a 12-year-old bourbon that's probably great by itself, and then you blend it with a single malt, and then you add and you blend in a rye, and you've got 3 things in there, and you just completely killed the bourbon. The single malt can't stand out, and the rye tasted like shit to begin with. So yeah, that's
just because it's
stuff.
innovation does not mean it's good.
Yeah. So when it comes when you're in the shoes of Kenny, Ryan, and sometimes Blake, you know, you have to make it be different, right? You have to make it stand out. And what I'm seeing is that a lot of new bottlers getting into the business are making things stand out in a bad way. You know, they're ruining what is probably a very good base by blending it out or over finishing it or using a barrel that has no business being used. Like, look, tequila barrels don't match well with whiskey. They just don't. And so I just think leave that stuff alone. Don't get too far away from traditional flavor profiles.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, you know, I agree with Dave Mandel's comment completely. And it's kind of cool to see him be that honest about it. But it's a hindsight problem, if we're being honest, just because 5 years ago, if you're talking about building a brand, it's like distill or do as much contract distilling now as you can, because then your cogs are locked in and all this stuff. And yeah, we're going to have a glut for a little bit of time. But I think that's, you know, what Fred was saying, where it's great for the consumer. You're going to get a ton of cool options, higher age statements, higher proofs, lower prices. So if you're into drinking and, you know, good bourbon at a good price, I mean, you can get 6-year bourbon on the open market for cheaper than you can get contract distillation at times, which is just wild. I mean, that's complete opposite of what it was 2 years ago. I mean, shoot, we're even playing around with like, do we bring out the $2 chuck of bourbon? Like, could we put a 6-year-old bourbon in a bottle for $20 and have it available? Because, you know, you want people to drink, you want people fun and exciting, and it's not going with like the tequila finish or some crazy different thing that's never been done. And, you know, it's like just good bourbon at a very affordable price. Like, I don't think anybody's too upset about that. But, you know, I would say there's still ways to differentiate themselves when you're a new brand. And that's only good for the consumer, just because it's more bottles out there. It's more whiskey out there. Hopefully they're doing something different to it. And it's not going to last forever, though. I imagine in 4 to 5 years, we're going to be back in the same spot as we were, because consumption's not slowing down all that much, even though supply has increased quite a bit. Once we're kind of through this wave of a glut, we're going to be right back where we were. And it's like, shoot, now 4-year-old bourbon's at $3,000 a barrel now, or whatever it may be. And everybody's going to be saying, man, we should have just bought everything we could when the prices were super cheap. And we'll start this cycle all over again on episode number 186.
No, that'll be about how the 3-tier system caused all of it. That's what that episode will be about.
We kind of haven't gotten in on one of those recently.
Hey, we haven't done a 3-tier system in a while,
because
Kenny and Ryan are too busy, trying to get the right distributors. They don't want to piss them off.
That's right.
Yeah,
they just we might be able to put a few on blast.
Their distributors afterwards. Were you talking about Beeman in that episode? No, not you. We love you.
You're one of the good ones, I promise.
Yep. Kenny, you bring up are people going to be excited? The one thing and I agree that there's a ton of stock and, people are going to have options. The problem is that the ton of stock is a lot of generic, like what I call commodity mash bills. They're like the same things, like 75-21-4s, or, from not only MGP, but, Green River, Bardstown, you name it, Castle Key, there's a lot of like commodity mash bills. It's all going to be kind of the same whiskey that was really produced because when people were the investors were laying down this whiskey, they're like, well, what mash bill do I go with? And they're like, I don't know, just go with the one that everybody goes with. And so you're going to have to get creative. And, age does wonderful things to the whiskey. And, we'll have, and Blake, you brought up a good point. Another good point is that talking to people, this year, I think about the whiskey production is down about 60 to 70% from like 2 years ago. And so, as you mentioned, 6 to 7 years from now, what does that mean for the market? And there's going to be another, again, like shortage because everybody's cut down still time. They're cutting back all the stills. And so, like if you have cash, like I think right now is like a great time to buy new make and sit on it for 5-6 years, and I think you'll make great returns because of that lack in demand. But I am excited, especially for the next 3 or 4 years, just because when Kenny and I started and you went to the source market, it was either MGP or like maybe a little bit of Barton, but it was so expensive that you were gonna have to charge $150, $200 a bottle. And whereas now you see what's on the market and you're like, wow, this is exciting. You have options from not only the contract producers, but also from the big brands and stuff. So from a blender's perspective, there's all these like flavors that you really didn't have this much access to. And it's really exciting.
There's another question that came here in the chat, unless somebody else has anything else they want to chime in there. And this was again from somebody else saying that, Joe said, do you think the availability of high quality source whiskey from large distilleries is going to raise the bar for all producers, or does that stifle innovation at distillation because of maybe creating a lot of that commodity stuff?
Well, let's be honest, like the distillation side of things is not where most of the innovation has happened. That's all been the same for the most part. If you see, where we have seen more creativity has been with the contract distillers who can do custom things. And I just go back to like, it's the mash bill. It matters some, the yeast matters a lot more, but it just, I don't think it's going to impact the innovation at the distillery side. I think if you want to take a look at the quality side of things, there are many distillers who have been accused of like putting barrels on wholesale receipts and then baiting and switching them. Taking a lot of barrels that that they had originally sold and using them for their brands instead. That has happened. You know, I don't think there's ever been a lawsuit about that, but that kind of inroad fighting is the jostling that I would be very curious to see if that comes up with where we are right now. But the truth is, I don't think, you know, the distillers themselves are trying to keep their lights on, and I think they're just going to do whatever they can right now. Think of Beam, Heaven Hill, Four Roses, people like that. They're going to do whatever they can right now to do that. And if you tell me that I could start a brand tomorrow with Four Roses, with with access to Four Roses, Wild Turkey, Jim Beam, Heaven Hill, Buffalo Trace, and I'm like, I can pick whatever I want from those distillers, I'm like, sign me up. Let's go.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like every time we get on here, I end up plugging some release we're working on, but not intended. But, you know, when we're talking about the bigger brands and that being available, Elevate and everything, I think it's true. And something we're doing for a November release is whiskey sourced from 4 major heritage distilleries in Kentucky. And that's where I think independent bottling does play a big role, because these unnamed 4 distilleries that you can figure out by the mash bill and the city they were distilled in, they're never going to call each other and say, hey, you know what? I wonder if my bourbon tastes good blended with your bourbon and our neighbor's bourbon. And I feel like that, you know, just doesn't get done without sourcing and independent bottlers. And that's the fun part that's the fun part for the consumers, because I feel like we've all done that at, you know, whiskey meetups and stuff. It's like, you know, we're 7 pours in, let's try blending this on our own. It's like, oh wow, that's really good. You know, thinking back of like what's the one, California Gold, where he would do something similar. It's like, you need independent bottlers to do those types of things and experiments, because you just don't know, because the big guys aren't incentivized to do that. So, you know, them coming on the market elevates it even more, because you can play around with different blends like that when it's coming from 4 different distilleries, or maybe that blend, you know, a big heritage distillery blended with MGP. Who knows? That could be amazing. And so, to Fred's point, it's like, hey, if you're going to start a brand and you get the option, you're probably just going with the biggest name or the distillery you love their whiskey the most, and that elevates the whole category. So I think that's something we'll definitely see more of.
Do we think
Yeah,
that?
go
Go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to add that, you know, it depends on what the source, you know, all the source bourbon that's potentially coming in the near future. What kind of, where it's coming from, and what is it going to be, and what is it going to taste like? And to Fred's point, where, you know, it's kind of refreshing, at least when a bourbon comes in, even right now, it's refreshing when something kind of falls into that classic Kentucky taste. You know, but going in the future, to Ryan's point, is so much going to be kind of comedy or whatever. You know, the mash bills, there's just, everything's kind of tasting the same, because what I'm drinking here tonight is I got a Fay Ranch Bell Cones and a Jimmy Red sitting here, and those 3 couldn't be any more different from each other. And they, you know, and they potentially are going to really stand out even in the future, compared to maybe this flood of source stuff that is going to come from a lot of the very large distilleries. You know, it's going to be what consumers' tastes are going to be like maybe 5 years from now. Are they going to find a normal, or, you know, a very traditional Kentucky flavor profile refreshing? Or are they still going to be after something unique? Because those 3 I just you know, mentioned, they're going to have a head start against anybody coming up. And that's the other thing is, like, there's so many great craft distilleries that are coming of age, really to their, you know, to the great point right now. That quality is going to be there, and they're still going to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, and now that you say you bring that up, and knowing that there's, you know, a ton of craft distilleries out there, I'm surprised we haven't seen more of a Lost Lantern type, more companies like that kind of pop up. I mean, we had talked about it before. We had started doing that with Pursuit series, and we found it incredibly difficult to work with brands, but that was during a different time. Lost Lantern has found pretty good success in this early portion, working with a few distilleries and releasing those under their own brand. I think I'm blanking on the name, but I know there's another one. It's even smaller than them, but I'm surprised that aren't more of them starting to pop up now, knowing that you've got, a couple thousand distilleries across the US. Then I'm sure all of them are looking for an outlet to sell their whiskey. I'm really surprised that we haven't seen more stuff either pop up either from that aspect or end up on those spreadsheets that we all end up seeing in our mailboxes anyway.
Yep. And two, I see in the comments, some people are saying like, oh, I enjoy NDP's like selection of legacy distilleries and whatnot. I think the reason that is like distilleries, especially the big six, they're looking for consistencies and they want consistent products. And what ends up on the source market is, and I'm not saying they're going and picking barrels but they historically know that like, okay, these rick houses are kind of more of our commodity low grade whiskey that we know, like, okay, especially like the bottom shelf stuff is really hurting the big brands right now. And so they have those stocks that are sitting aging, and that's what you see that ends up on the source market. And I'm not saying it's bottom shelf whiskey. Like it's,
Well, I mean,
it's
the
just
15-year buff turkey ended up on through the same exact kind of idea, right? It wasn't because it was bottom shelf, it's because it didn't fit the profile
Exactly.
that they wanted.
correctly. And I think as whiskey geeks, they appreciate that because it's like, oh, I got this Heaven Hill or Wild Turkey or MGP that, because most time you have that, 7 and 9 MGP, it's pretty solid, but most MGP products don't come in Kelvin barrels. Then when you try in a Kelvin barrel and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like on a whole nother level, but it doesn't fit inside their profile of what they're trying to do for their brands. And that's across all distilleries. And so that's why you have these interesting, unique whiskeys that show up on the source market. And that really resonates with whiskey geeks. Does it resonate with average consumers? Don't think so. But whiskey geeks, 100%.
Here's another thing that I have noticed. You brought up the bottom shelf, Ryan. Go and taste recent Maker's Mark, Jim Beam, Evan Williams, and compare it to something from like a few years ago, like the same product from a few years ago. If you happen to have those bottles, I'm telling you, like they're using older stocks in those like $15 to $30 bottles. You can absolutely taste the difference. You can see the color difference too, obviously. But now that
Fred at this time can't see the color difference, but when his eyes.
Fair. Well
It's all
played.
black.
Well played. I'd have to look at it a little differently. For those who will be listening to this on the audio side, I had eye surgery recently, so I'm wearing the Ray Charles glasses, and I'm probably going to have to wear them for a while. So there's going to be a lot of those kinds of jokes coming my way, which I will remember every one of them.
You're
for
on
all
the
the mic comments. I had good audio for 1 week, and all of a sudden I just get to throw jokes.
I know, right?
That's right.
You deserve it. But I if you look at some of those lesser expensive bottles that are out there, you're gonna be amazed like how tasty some of them are. Like the Four Roses Yellow Label, I had that the other day, and I was like, holy crap, this is like going back in time for me. It is actually really kind of cool. It's really kind of cool.
I had the Beam pin bowl, the whatever you call it, the bowling pin, and I opened it up, and I was expecting it just to be like pretty average to mediocre, and it actually was pretty flavorful, like coming out of the bottle. And I was talking to Freddie about it, Bourbon. He's like, yeah, we put some really old stocks in that, and I was like, at 83 proof or whatever, I thought it was pretty good. I mean, for compared to like what I've had from in that proof range from Beam, with Basil Hayden's or White Label or even Jim Beam Black, I think they're definitely putting better whiskey in. And two, NDPs get a bad rep, but they have really like helped keep the bourbon industry alive during times like this. And you really didn't have this like infatuation with whiskey geekdom until, you know, you had the Willets and the Old Scouts and the OKIs and you know, I'm forgetting some, but they really started this whole like kind of whiskey nerddom and collecting and this and that, and that's what's going to help this industry survive, or non-distilling producers, you know, really keeping consumers engaged and creating new and exciting stuff. And a lot of people don't know, NDPs do not get as favorable, you know, tax terms or financial situations as distilleries do. And, you know, people say, well, because you don't make your own stuff, blah, 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 blah. But NDPs have saved the industry and made the industry a ton of money, and they should be treated with the same amount of respect that distilleries do, because they keep this industry going through good times and bad times.
I gotta say, Ryan, you remind me of Randy Marsh. I thought you were going off on you're about to have a South Park moment there. The respect. But you know what? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And because even though we will all admit the 3-tier system has a lot of work to do, but because there's like Sealbox out there and these online retailers that can hit states, there's just enough like marketing and business promise on the online sector that people are saying, you know what? I know times are down. I could start my own NDP and I can make this work. You know what? I'm a celebrity Johnny, you know, guy comes over and says, you know what? My audience will want to jump into this. So because there is actually now for the first time in the gluts we've ever, since the first time that there's been a glut, there is direct to consumer marketability that could be very promising. And here's the thing, that if we could, as a country, find a way to have it where alcohol could be sold on something like Amazon, that could just blitz all 50 states without the system, finding a way to pay the
we
taxes.
just bite off a seal box, but go to all 50 states.
You know, I didn't want to.
Right.
Obviously,
I mean,
that's my preference.
Amazon would
but
be you know, it's like it's done in every European country, and they don't have some crazy higher amounts of underage drinking and, you know, drunk driving incidents and all this other stuff, but yet we still push it back as consumer protection. But not the point of this episode, so I won't dive down that rabbit
but
hole.
actually, I think it's actually really important when we talk about NDPs and the importance of source whiskey and the health and future of the American whiskey market. Because you talk to smaller distillers, they're getting boxed out of the liquor store. Okay, so their only avenue to get customers is selling directly to them. They can't get on the shelf because the liquor stores can't put them there, and they have to go where their bread is buttered, which is Jack Daniel's and Maker's Mark and brands like that. So, you know, I think it is an important conversation to have here, because if we take away Sealbox, they're dead. If we take away the online retailer, they're dead.
I wish I had like a big like clapping emoji that I could like put in the screen right now. I totally agree with you, Fred. I love it. That was
well,
a fantastic take.
Very spot on, because you think about the route to market. Like if we're going to talk about all these NDPs and everything and how they're can be more exciting, and it's like, well, what's the route to market to them? I think everybody on here has had their struggles with just how you get it out there. But how many NDPs have we gone to for barrel picks where it just blows the big guys out of the water? I mean, you go to a Nashville barrel company, you go to Nulu, you go to, you know, do a rare character pick, you go to a pursuit pick, and the experience is just so much more fun, because it's like, oh, you want to try stuff in honey, you want to try stuff in maple, you want to try 10-year straight bourbon, you want to try 10-year straight bourbon at hazmat, and that's such a more exciting process.
A lot of buzzwords you hit there.
Yeah, just going to, you know, all right, let's sit down. Here's your 3 samples from 100 ml. Please taste them in the next 45 minutes and be about your way after eating some corn chips. And not to say it's anything bad about how the big guys have to do it, but it's just a different experience. And then it's like, well, how are we going to get this? Like, well, where are you located? And that's where I feel like there should be since we're diving into the 3-tier a little bit, some sort of craft exception for direct distribution, whatever it may be. I know Kentucky was pushing for that for a while, but it's still pretty limited in states. But that is a very needed thing for these NDPs to continue to survive, because they've got interest out there. They've got customers that want the product. On the back end, how they get them to that product to them, that's a much more difficult question to answer.
Yeah, you both bring up a good point. You have all this access and all these great barrels, but distributors are not taking on new customers. They're like, nope, we're trying to clean up our mess we made from 5 years ago when we were buying everything, and we're simplifying. We're focusing on our big brands, and that's the part that does scare me. That could, if we can't dig out of this hole with all this excess inventory if there's not a route to market. And so even the big brands, I think, are going to have to like be a part of the solution, because they have to get rid of all their stocks too, because they've overproduced, and there has to be an outlet to market to move all this whiskey. And it's very difficult right now as a new brand to get a distributor to take you on and give you shelf presence in the store.
As we can
Can't
speak
all go into
from
an RTD.
experience.
That's
Yeah.
right.
We're trying to do that too. I think that's going to be on the short list. If we can ever crawl ourselves out of the work hole, we just need to find time to do it. But let's go ahead. That's going to wrap it up. This was a really fun one. As we started getting into this, I was kind of curious of what turns it was going to take. But I think at the very end, we hit on a lot of things that kind of looked at, the pros of NDPs and sort of what what do they offer to the broader market. And I hope after you listen to this, especially if you know somebody that says, all I drink is Heaven Hill or Maker's Mark or Wild Turkey, it's like, yeah, well, maybe you should take a listen and kind of see what else is that you've been missing out on. And I think that's probably one of the greatest things is that everything is, especially when you get to this NDP side, while there is going to be a lot of noise to filter through, you will be able to find the ones that you truly align with, whether it's a story, whether it's a flavor profile, whether it's where they're sourcing it from, blending capabilities, finishing capabilities. There's going to be a lot of things that you can discover, and it just doesn't have to be that same old profile that Eric had kind of mentioned in his part of the show there too. But let's go ahead and let's round this out. So Fred and Ryan, thank you for joining us. But Eric, go ahead.
All right, I'm Eric from Breaking Bourbon. Thanks for having me again, and I'm looking forward to the next 5-10 years of what's going to happen with everything we talked about tonight with NDPs.
Yeah, you're gonna have to keep that Breaking Bourbon calendar open now with every single NDP release that's coming out.
Oh, it's getting ridiculous. Every year it grows.
I don't see how you keep up.
You got to figure out a way to automate that thing. I don't know how, but figure it out. And Blake.
Yep, Blake from Sealbox. Always fun to be here. Some of these topics, I think, man, are we going to get an hour in on this? And now I'm like, well, there's so many more points we could have talked about. So always a fun one, very enjoyable, and always good to sit down with y'all. Thanks.
Very much so. And like I said, I know we talked about a lot of great brands on this episode. Make sure you go and check them out. Make sure you go and buy a bottle, see what you're doing, go to a bottle share, sample swap, whatever it's got to be. Make sure you go and try a bunch of different stuff out there. But with that, cheers, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Toodles.
Vodka sucks.
All right.
It was good.
We didn't fuck barrel. We didn't. I think we mentioned barrel once or twice, but
Yeah.
I said barrel. I talked.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I was like, we mentioned barrel there, Matt.
Well, that's kind of
Sorry
the
about that.
hard part is like you start going through the list and you're like, well, I'm not just going to sit here and just ramble off
Spout
12
off every great NDP.
NDPs. You definitely miss.
By the
some.
way, how smart do they look with the moves that they made? And we were all like, "Oh my gosh, what's happening with barrel?" Remember that? And then they were just like ahead of the wave coming, and they're like making business decisions because they saw what was about to happen. And I think back to that and like how they reacted to the moment. And I was talking to Joe, and they're doing well.
Yeah, I got to catch up with Joe on Friday of KBF, and you love to see it because he's always been one of my favorite guys in the industry, and like they were one of the first, so you don't want to lose them for sure. And I swear we tasted a few things. They've got this triple rum finish coming out, and then that was maybe one of the best things I tried at KBF. And then they've got this light whiskey finished in Isla barrels for like 7 years, and it was just wild. So, probably some rough roads at times, but it seems like they're in a good spot.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe is still Joe. He still has like, one blogger who made an off comment, and he's like, "We're gonna hunt this guy down."
That sounds right.
Well, we all love Joe. We all have a Joe story too.
Yeah. I think them coming out with the foundation and the double oak really, help give them like a base product that I think it just got too confusing, too many, products. But yeah, talking to the team there, good friends with them. I think they're in a great spot. So I'm happy for them.
Yeah.
Because I love what they're doing. I think they're one of the best NDPs out there and one of the originals. And so I'm happy to see them.
They were they created the map, honestly, that you guys are using and others are using on blending. So
yeah,
they kind of set the structure of like how to do that kind of company.
Does Matt feel bad about showing up late to the show because now he's just firing on all cylinders?
He is.
He's trying to get in all the comments before we turn it off.
He's like, I'm gonna go rapid fire before these guys have to go to bed.
Make your own juice.
Though.
Meanwhile, they can't wait to buy their Penelope estate, and it's not wrong.
Yeah, he's right. But also, man, I think you got to take into consideration that
Penelope's not considered sourced anymore, right?
No, they're
now it's considered distilled by them.
Mm.
Oh, that's true. I didn't even think about that. I need to change that on our.
I don't think all of it is.
Well,
it's all part of Lux, right?
Oh yeah. Well, but I mean, didn't they have some Heaven Hill juice?
I don't think so.
Contract distilled for Luxro. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all under the Lux umbrella.
Yeah. All right. So double sourced.
Fred, don't give me any good ideas. Double sourced will be trademarked tomorrow.
Well, I mean, people don't realize how much in-selling happens in between the brands, like it just happens so much. And it's to the point that the people at the distillery don't even know about it.
Yeah.
It's just
and
always
how many distilleries have you talked to where they're like, we don't sell any barrels, we don't do any contract distill, and I'm like, well, I have some of your barrels, so how did I get them?
And also, a lot of times that's usually someone who is kind of a figurehead, and
they're far removed from the
and then I don't really ever have the heart to correct them, but there's a couple of those that are like that.
A lot of CFOs are making their weight in gold right now, trying to squeeze pennies out of nickels out of pennies right now, just trying to turn a profit on something somehow.
Which one other thing we didn't even get into is just like, I mean, do you remember 5-6 years ago what it was like to source bourbon? I mean, you went to MGP or you had knew somebody at Barton, and that was about it. And now, I mean, there's, Advanced Spirits has their barrel hub. There's brokers all over the place. There's,
Hogshead.
It's just,
you can get on there.
It was all like off balance sheet on some random guys. I always tell people, I'm like, it's like old horse traders who just love the thrill. So they got into bourbon wholesale market trading, and now it is a little more legitimized, thankfully at times, but all right.
All right.
We done?
That is good. Let's go ahead and let's cut it. So guys, stay on. Thank you everybody that joined us for the live stream. Matt, if you have one more comment to throw in the comments section, now's your time. Now's your chance to do it. Yes.
Okay, who
just
gets
go ahead
their
and put it up
barrels?
there. Lots of great 7-year-old high proof stuff.
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and let's kind of thank you everybody that joined us live. We
Bye.
appreciate it, and we will see you in a month.
Mhm.